I put over 40 hours of research into planning the Scotland trip, and now you get to steal my entire itinerary. I will show you how we explored Edinburgh, both Newtown and Old Town, with a day trip to St. Andrews, and then how we took the train north to Inverness to spend a few days exploring the Scottish Highlands. And for my fellow Outlander fans, I definitely worked some of my favorite Outlander stops into the trip. Now, when I build an itinerary, I don't like every hour of every day scheduled. I like to have a couple of things planned each day, map them out geographically so they naturally flow together, and then leave some flexibility for the moment. I will walk you through exactly what we did, what I would absolutely do again, where we ate, and some of my favorite experiences from the entire trip. I am also a highly sensitive traveler, so I put in some hacks to help keep me a little more balanced and regulated during the trip. So day one, we landed in Edinburgh around 7 a.m., which is honestly not my favorite time to arrive anywhere. So we did something a little unconventional and booked our hotel room for the night before, even though we weren't actually there yet. That meant our room was already ready when we arrived. We stayed at the Nera Caledonia, which I highly recommend. It's a beautiful boutique hotel tucked into a quieter residential area of Newtown. Our room also included breakfast at their amazing restaurant, which you can eat at even if you're not a guest. So we dropped off our bags, had a proper Scottish breakfast, showered, slept for a couple hours, and then headed out once the city started waking up. If you can afford the extra hotel night when you have a really early arrival, it is absolutely worth it. I intentionally started us in Newtown because it's quieter and a little less overwhelming than Old Town. After an overnight flight and a big time change, I thought this would be a much nicer way to ease into the trip before moving over to the busier side of Edinburgh. Plus, there are some amazing things to see in Newtown. Newtown is a little bit of a misleading name because there's nothing particularly new about it. This part of Edinburgh was largely developed in the 18th and 19th century, and it's known for its beautiful Georgian architecture. Together, Edinburgh's Old Town and New Towns make up a UNESCO World Heritage Site. So after resting for a bit, we started in Stockbridge, which is this little village-like neighborhood right near our hotel. We were there on a Sunday, which is when they have their outdoor market, so we wandered through that before walking over to Circus Lane, which is one of Edinburgh's most photographed streets. It's this adorable curved cobblestone lane lined with historic houses and flowers. It's a great photo op as it's ridiculously charming. From there, we drop down to the Water of Leith, which is a peaceful riverside walking path that makes you almost forget you're in the middle of a city. Along this path is St. Bernard's Well, this beautiful little neoclassical temple built over a natural mineral spring that was once believed to have healing properties. I loved this. If you just keep following the river, Dean Village starts appearing through the trees, and Dean Village is gorgeous. This was once a milling village. There were mills operating along this water for centuries, and today you still have these old stone buildings clustered around the river, little bridges and greenery everywhere. It looks like a fairy tale village hidden in the middle of Edinburgh. You feel like if there was ever a possibility you would run into a fairy or a troll, it would definitely be here. This was a great way to spend the first day after a long travel. By dinner, we were tired and wanted something easy and close by, so our hotel recommended Cata, a small Spanish tapas restaurant right down the street that's popular with the locals. The next morning, we had another leisurely and amazing breakfast at the Nera Caledonia before checking out and leaving Newtown. Then we headed to New Battle Golf Club, and if golf isn't your thing, obviously skip this part. But if you are a golfer, playing around in Scotland is such a fun thing to work into the trip. After golf, we officially moved over to Abbeyhill, where we stayed in an awesome Airbnb for the rest of our time in Edinburgh. Abbeyhill is a historic Victorian neighborhood near Holyrood Park that feels artistic and local, but it's also close to Old Town and everything we had planned over the next few days. We wanted a low-key afternoon after golf, so we just wandered the neighborhood. We had dinner at Herringbone, which is a modern Scottish restaurant, and then took an after-dinner walk through the beautiful Holyrood Park, which is basically the backyard of our Airbnb. Day 3 was time for classic Edinburgh, Old Town. Our Airbnb host had very sweetly left us some simple breakfast food, so we had a light breakfast there and then stopped at the Milkman for coffee before heading to Edinburgh Castle. I booked the 9:30 entry to Edinburgh Castle, which was the first time slot of the day. And this is one of my favorite travel hacks if you're like me and you don't love huge crowds. Book the first morning entry slot. It was noticeably quieter when we arrived compared to what we saw later in the day. And definitely give yourself some time here. Edinburgh Castle isn't just one castle building, it's this massive historic fortress complex. We spent about 2.5 hours there, which felt about right. By the time we left, we were starving, so we went to Maker's Mash Bar for lunch. This place is extremely popular and it was really good. Even at lunch, we waited around an hour to get in, but if you want to go for dinner, you need to make a reservation weeks or even more than that in advance. Then we spent the rest of the afternoon exploring the Royal Mile, which is basically the historic spine of Old Town, running from Edinburgh Castle down to Holyrood Palace. And this is where I actually recommend not having every minute plan. Have a few places you want to find, but then just wander. Go down the little streets, pop into an old church, turn down a street because it looks interesting. There's so much history packed into this area that some of the fun is just seeing what you stumble across. A few of my favorite stops were Victoria Street, this colorful curved street often associated with the inspiration for Diagon Alley, and Grass Market, the historic square sitting beneath the castle. And obviously, I found a bookstore. Armchair Books is this wonderfully chaotic little secondhand bookstore packed floor to ceiling with books. And for my fellow Outlander fans, find Bakehouse Close, which was used as the exterior of Jamie Fraser's print shop. Now, here's one thing I would do differently. Make a dinner reservation. We intentionally left dinner open because I like having flexibility when I travel, but Old Town Edinburgh taught me that flexibility and dinner reservations are not mutually exclusive. So I would leave your afternoon open to wander, but book dinner reservations when you want to eat in Old Town. The next morning, we woke up and hiked Arthur's Seat, which is basically in the backyard of our Airbnb. Arthur's Seat is the remains of an ancient extinct volcano inside Holyrood Park, right in the middle of Edinburgh. So you can literally walk out of the city and suddenly be hiking through this rugged volcanic landscape. We got a decent early start and made our way past St. Margaret's Loch, the ruins of St. Anthony's Chapel, and the ancient hill fort remains before heading up towards the summit. So you're hiking through thousands of years of history while getting these incredible views over Edinburgh. Afterward, we went back to the Airbnb, rested for a short bit, and then headed back into Old Town for more wandering along the Royal Mile. We stopped at Luckin Booths for lunch, which I really enjoyed. That evening, we had a 5 p.m. tour of the real Mary's King Close, which was my favorite historical experience in Edinburgh. I 11 out of 10 recommend it. So centuries ago, these were actual streets called closes where people lived and worked. As Edinburgh changed and new buildings were constructed, portions of these old neighborhoods were sealed off and built over, leaving this almost frozen piece of old Edinburgh underneath the city. It's a little eerie, but also just so fascinating. You walk through the old underground streets and rooms while hearing stories from these amazing Scottish storytelling guides about the real people who lived there, how families lived, what their homes looked like, and what everyday life was like in 17th century Edinburgh. I actually love doing this in the evening. There's something about going underground into old Edinburgh as the day is winding down that just fits the experience kind of perfectly. Day 5 was our last full day based in Edinburgh before heading north to Inverness. We rented a car and took a day trip to St. Andrews, which is only about an hour and a half from Edinburgh by car. But instead of driving straight there, I mapped out a couple of Outlander stops along the way that flowed perfectly with the route. Our first stop was Mid-Hope Castle, better known as Lollybrock for my Outlander people, which is only about 35-minute drive from Edinburgh. You do have to pay to visit, and I'll admit I initially rolled my eyes a little bit and thought, this better be worth it. But it was. I loved it. From there, it was about another 35-minute drive to Falkland, which is this adorable little Scottish village that Outlander fans will recognize as the show's version of Inverness. This is where Claire and Frank stay when they first arrive in Inverness before Claire goes through the stones. You can see the Covenanter Hotel, which became Mrs. Baird's guest house in the show, and the Bruce Fountain, where Frank sees the mysterious Highlander looking up at Claire's window. Even if you don't watch Outlander, though, Falkland is totally worth the stop. It's this charming old Scottish village with stone buildings, little shops, and the Falkland Palace right in the center of it. We continued towards St. Andrews, which was about another 35 minutes away. And the drive itself is gorgeous. We were there in the spring, so everything was really green and blooming as you drive through this beautiful Scottish countryside on the way to the coast. Then we arrived in St. Andrews. Obviously, St. Andrews is known as the birthplace of golf, and we're golfers, so seeing the old course was absolutely part of the day. But St. Andrews is so much more than golf. It's home to the University of St. Andrews, founded in the early 1400s and the oldest university in Scotland. As a lover of old books, I really wanted to see the King James Library, which is a beautiful 17th century library founded during the reign of King James VI. It's not open for tourists, but between us, I did manage to sneak inside, which made me ridiculously happy. Then we explored the ruins of St. Andrew's Castle, perched right above the sea, and St. Andrew's Cathedral, this enormous medieval cathedral complex that gives you a sense of just how important St. Andrews once was. And we happened to be there during Beltane, the ancient Gaelic festival traditionally marking the beginning of summer. The university students still carry on the Beltane tradition, so it was really cool seeing that these very old customs are still part of life in St. Andrews today. And then somehow Scotland gave me the best gelato I've ever had. We stopped at Janetta's Gelateria, which has been serving gelato in St. Andrews for more than a century. I spent the rest of the afternoon walking the coastline and wandering through town before having dinner at Four Guns, this warm, rustic Scottish restaurant that focuses on fresh Scottish produce. The next morning, we left Edinburgh and took the train north to Inverness, and I highly recommend doing this. Give yourself a little extra time at the train station. There's actually some really great places to grab food, and it's nice to get there early, figure out where you're going, grab something to eat, and just not feel rushed. I personally love the European train system, and this is such a beautiful way to see more of Scotland. Get a window seat because you literally watch the scenery change as you make your way north into the Highlands. We upgraded to first class. The price difference wasn't that much, so if you want to splurge a little, I thought it was worth it. Once we arrived in Inverness, we picked up our rental car. I definitely recommend having a car for this portion of the trip. Inverness itself is very walkable, but if you're really wanting to explore the Highlands, that's going to be a little difficult to do without a car. After getting our car, we immediately went to one of my favorite experiences of the entire trip. I had found Keelacree Tea Room at Drumbuie Farm, which is not particularly easy to find online. This is a hidden gem that you can thank me later for. It is definitely a book ahead experience. It is a family farm and home that looks like something out of a painting. They host this beautiful Highland cow afternoon tea experience with mocktails, tea sandwiches, cakes, and treats. And I'm gluten-free, and they did an amazing gluten-free spread for me. Then you get to go outside and meet the Highland cows, which they call coos. They give you treats to feed them and you get to pet them. I mean, I was absolutely beside myself. That evening, we headed back to Inverness and had dinner at River House, an excellent restaurant that serves fresh local food right along River Ness. We finished the day with a quiet after dinner walk along River Ness. I would repeat this entire day exactly as we did it. It was perfect. The next morning, we started at Inverness's Victorian Market, a covered market dating back to the 1800s. We had breakfast at Café de Paulo, quickly wandered through the market, and then I went straight to Leakey's bookshop. It's Scotland's largest secondhand bookshop inside an old church with books everywhere and a giant wood-burning stove in the middle. Then we headed to the Black Isle, which is actually a peninsula just north of Inverness. My husband golfed at Fortrose and Rosemarkie Golf Club, this gorgeous and famous course right on the coast. I decided not to golf because I had other priorities. Ferries. While he golfed, we walked the coast towards Channery Point Lighthouse. We grabbed tea at Crofter's Cafe, and then we headed to Fairy Glen. Fairy Glen is an easy woodland hike through this green, mossy, mystical forest with waterfalls and ferns. It genuinely feels like somewhere you might stumble across fairies. Afterward, we picked my husband up and we drove to Cromarty, this beautiful little coastal village. We had a drink at the historic Royal Hotel overlooking the water and then dinner at Suter Creek, which was phenomenal. Our last full day in the Highlands ended up being one of my favorite days of the entire trip. We hired a private Highland guide named Jamie with the Secret Highlands and booked his quieter side of Loch Ness tour. If you're going to splurge on one experience in the Highlands, this is where I would do it. Jamie is a local Highlander, an incredible storyteller, so this felt very different from a traditional sightseeing tour. We started at Clava Cairns, this incredible 4,000-year-old Bronze Age site made up of ancient stone burial chambers surrounded by these massive stone circles. And if you're an Outlander fan, the moment you see those stones, you're going to immediately think of Craignadoon. From there, we went to Culloden Battlefield, where the final battle of the Jacobite Rising took place in 1746. And obviously, the Jacobite story is a huge part of the Outlander series. We stopped at Foyer's Bay food truck for an unexpectedly amazing lunch, and then Jamie took us hiking into the ancient Caledonian forest. So now we're hiking through an ancient Scottish forest with a Highlander storyteller teaching us about the history, wildlife, and the native plants around us. Eventually, he took us down to this quiet, hidden side of Loch Ness, which is this enormous freshwater loch, of course, famous for Nessie, the Loch Ness Monster. Instead of seeing Loch Ness at one of the busy tourist areas, we came through the forest to this incredible peaceful side of the loch. That really sums up why I love this tour so much. It felt less like Jamie was giving us a tour and more like he was sharing his beloved homeland with us. That night, we went back into Inverness and had dinner at Pasha Turkish Kitchen, which was very good. I will absolutely be back to Scotland. I put a ridiculous amount of work into this itinerary, but I genuinely feel like we knocked this trip out of the park. We went from the end of April into the early May, which I would absolutely recommend. The weather was mild, the spring landscape was beautiful, and we hardly got rained on at all. From Scotland, we continued to Ireland, and I've already made an entire itinerary video for that trip too. So if you want to steal my Ireland itinerary next, I'll link that below.